Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Penn State Blitz here on Penn Live. Greg Pickel, before we talk about Penn State and Iowa, there's a little bit of Georgia State house cleaning to get to here in our four downs here on the Blitz. James Franklin went out of his way to address something that happened late in Penn State's 56-0 win over Georgia State. It was nearly not a shutout.
Correct.
Georgia State was driving. And they lined up to attempt a short field goal.
Mm-hmm.
James called timeout.
Right.
And then the Georgia State kicker missed. Right. So Penn State got the shutout. But James received quite a bit of criticism, the perception being that he tried to ice the kicker in a 56-0 game. And he had something to say about that today.
Yeah, he sure did. It's not often that he goes out of his way to make remarks like that in his opening statement. Fairly consistently, he'll wait for a question on it unless he really feels strongly. And then when he feels strongly, Bob, that's exactly what he does. He comes out and says it. He was very clear about what he said after the game, which is that they felt like their fourth team and some third-teamers could not line up and field goal block correctly. If you go back and watch the tape, it was third and fourth string guys, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I can understand why people think that calling that timeout even still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But for James Franklin, that's who he is. He sticks to the way he does things. He's consistent about it. You don't have to agree with what he says. You can think it's this, that, or the other thing. And I can't fault you for it, but I can't fault James Franklin for sticking to his guns and believing in the fact that, they're going to stay on the field. I mean, this is a guy that didn't take starters out up 40 points against Akron. I mean, he's not into conceding points. He's not into getting his guys off the field. So to me, it just is what it is. I get both sides of it, but I think James Franklin said it best. That's who he is. That's who they are, and they're not going to change.
It was Penn State's second shutout of the season in 3 games. And personally, my opinion, Greg, is if you're going to accept a big check from Penn State football to come in and get your butt kicked, I think a shutout's part of the butt kicking, and Penn State can pretty much do what they want. And it's too bad if there are hurt feelings, but James feels very strongly about his approach.
Right.
Made it clear he's not going to change. Okay, second down. Last year when Penn State played Iowa, they played them this Saturday night in Iowa City. Big game, 2 3-0 teams. Penn State's now number 4. Last year when Penn State played Iowa, we saw Tommy Stevens score on a jet sweep in the fourth quarter. Penn State's backup quarterback lined up essentially as a receiver, took a sweep handoff from Trace McSorley. It scored. The Penn State crowd went wild. Tommy has done nothing but improve, Greg, since that game. And now Penn State in the first 3 games is using you're frequently seeing Trace and Tommy on the field at the same time. And James talked a little bit about what the advantage is of doing that, and whether or not maybe Iowa is going to be ready for that coming Saturday.
Yeah, no question, Bob. You have to prepare for him to maybe get it in pass. You have to prepare for him to maybe get it in run. You have to prepare for him to go out for a route. And oh, by the way, you have to figure out what old number 26 and old number 9 are doing in the backfield. So when you're able to put that pressure on a defense, you're going to score more often than not. And I would be curious to know how many times Tommy Stevens has been on the field in the red zone compared to how many times that play went for a touchdown. I'm not sure how long it would take to figure that out, but I have to think it's pretty common. I think it's probably all but 1 or 2 times they've been in the red zone and him on the field that they haven't scored. I mean, this is a weapon for Penn State that not every school has had in it. You can't really recall. I mean, the last time Penn State had 2 quarterbacks on the field at the same time, I think they were trying to figure out the Bolden-McGloin era. So it's certainly something for Penn State fans to be excited about. And for opposing teams, it's very difficult to stop. You've seen that with matchup problems. And this is a guy that was a receiver in high school, Bob. So he can catch the ball, he can throw it, and he's a pretty darn good runner, too.
Yeah, he's 6'5", 230. He's probably faster than Trace McSorley. You saw his arm in the Georgia State game. He threw Tommy Stevens threw a 35-yard touchdown pass in the third quarter. He took a shot, and that ball was close to 55 yards in the air. Tommy Stevens has scored as a runner, as a receiver, and he's thrown a touchdown pass this year. I would imagine, as James said, I don't think he's just blowing smoke. I think they're going to continue to evolve and develop this package, and Iowa had better be ready for it. Greg, speaking of being ready for something, Saquon Barkley is a talented running back, but Penn State very likely will see one of the better runners in the Big Ten and in the country, and Akram Wadley on Saturday night. He scored a touchdown in last year's Penn State-Iowa game. He's a little nicked up, but do you think Penn State's defense is going to be ready for Wadley?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because you saw Pitt, you've seen a couple other teams get success on the ground against Penn State so far. Not just chunk plays either. There's been some consistent running attacks. You're going to see Iowa move Penn State's defensive line back. I don't think that's any question about that. Unless this group takes a big step forward. It didn't sound necessarily like Torrance Brown would be ready.
Yeah.
James Franklin sort of hedged his bets, said he would have more information later in the week. Notably, not after practice tomorrow when he speaks to the media, but more information coming on that. They either have to step up in a big way, the linebackers are in that equation as well, or Iowa's going to be able to run the football. So
Yeah.
I think that really, to me, no matter who they have back there, the Butler kid, the other running back for them, is out.
Yeah.
But Wadley, we'll see. I'm assuming he will play. It's a matter of whether he's
Right.
100% or not. But they got two young kids that are pretty talented as well, Bob.
Yeah, and I think for the Penn State fans out there, if he does play and he's close to 100%, one thing to look for in the game is he's really good as a receiver, much like Saquon Barkley. I think in the Michigan game that they won last year, that big upset late in the year, he really hurt the Wolverines as a pass catcher as well. I would look for him if he's going to play. Penn State had also better be ready, and their linebackers had better be ready for Wadley as a receiver. That's third down. Let's get to fourth down.
Let's do it.
Amani Aruwariye,
Very good.
Penn State's third corner. I know it's like a coin flip whether or not I'm going to get that name right.
Yes.
He didn't play against Georgia State. We don't know what his availability will be for the Iowa game.
Right.
But one of the good things I think that came out of his absence was Penn State was able to use their two true freshman corners, Lamont Wade and Tariq Castro-Fields.
Yep.
They got significant reps. Castro-Fields had an interception in the game, a real athletic play, Greg.
Yep.
James Franklin believes that those guys, not only are they talented players, but he thinks they're really going to start to help them as the season moves forward.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think he'd love to have Amani as a part of that rotation. There's no question about it. But when you have a guy like Lamont Wade who came in January, and from day one it was clear he was going to play from game one, and you have Tariq Castro-Fields, who I think people thought might play, but I think he really took it up a notch during summer workouts and then obviously in camp as well. That was about as a fluid interception as you've seen from Penn State in some time, that one he had against Georgia State. And I think that these are two guys that you absolutely will see more and more of. I don't want to say that Amani Aruwariye got passed over due to injury, but he certainly is going to have to earn his reps back from two guys that, took them, obviously. I don't know if it was quite a split or if one had more than the other. I'm not exactly sure about that against Georgia State. But I think those two guys have earned whatever they get, and you're going to see more of them because Penn State's defense is just better and, not to mention, faster when those two are on the field.
Yeah, and not only that, there's an added benefit with those two. They really help, I think, on Penn State's coverage teams. They both can run. They're both aggressive players, and Penn State's developing special teams, continue to be a story this year. If they're not in the game on defense, I still think they can impact the game. On Penn State's kick coverage teams. That's third down for us.
Fourth down.
We're going to go fourth down, and then we're going to have an overtime segment.
I like it.
You lucky guys and girls out there. Actually, that was fourth down.
Yes.
Getting ahead of myself or behind myself. It's time to go to overtime.
It is overtime time, Bob. Here's the question. You can submit them every week right on here, Penn State on Penn Live, the Facebook page. You can also put them in the comment sections of our various stories at Penn Live, and we can get them to you. Here's the question, Bob.
Yep.
Brendan Mann.
Yes.
Back in Penn State's rotation this week. At least James Franklin is expecting him to be a guard. How much of a difference does it make for Penn State? Did James Franklin talk today about moving Steven Gonzalez around? They had to move some guys around the offensive line because Brendan Mann did not play against Georgia State. How much of a difference does him returning have, just for Penn State in the run game mostly, but also overall in the offensive line?
We were looking for Brendan in the Georgia State game, and I think you spotted him on the sideline with a wrap.
Yeah,
I believe it was on his right hand.
Yep.
The fact that it's not a lower body injury, that tells me there probably is a good chance that he's going to be able to play against Iowa. Versatile lineman, a veteran lineman, really helped Penn State at tackle last year.
Yep.
They've moved him into right guard. I thought they really did miss him in the run game against Georgia State.
Yep.
They slid Steven Gonzalez over to the right side, and they gave Will Fries his first start, a redshirt freshman offensive lineman. Thought he was going to be a tackle, but maybe he just might be one of those versatile guys that Penn State feels like he's one of their best 6 or 7 linemen. He was the next man up. I thought he played okay, but I think Penn State's the offense will be better for it if Brendan Mann's in the game. It looked like the injury that he had, I think, didn't look too significant. I do think he'll return. Ironically, I believe it was the Iowa game last year where he got hurt.
Right.
So I'm sure he would like to get back and take another shot there at the Hawkeyes. We'll see. But that is it for the Penn State Blitz. Before we go, though, I just want to remind everyone to subscribe to Penn Live's Penn State channel. Subscribe to it. Good stuff on there. If you don't subscribe.
Penn State on Penn Live YouTube, right?
Yep. YouTube.
Yep.
You're really missing out. Thanks for picking me up there.
Yes.
You're missing out if you don't subscribe. So that's it for the Blitz this week.